Hello. Welcome everybody. Sunday, 10th of December, 2017. I hope everybody's having a great day wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing. This is 50 Pips rocking and rolling. So welcome to another installment of the weekly outlook as everybody is eagerly waiting to see how these Bitcoin futures open up. So XBT, the CBOE contract, will have to wait until the 18th of December until we have the big boy, the CME contract. So again, not much to say there except that we're very happy that we're launching futures. Hopefully more liquidity, more activity, more attention to the product. So we're very happy to see the launch, and we'll be watching very closely. So what's going on in the markets as we enter central bank week, right? So we've got the FOMC on Wednesday, we've got SMB, BOE, ECB on Thursday, and then the following Thursday we're going to have the BOJ2 as we get closer and closer to winding down this year. So in terms of the markets, there's not that much to add really. I would strongly suggest you look back on the YouTube channel. We posted a video where we drilled down on the ES and looked at the ES in detail. And essentially what's happening here, well, not a lot, right? We're still stuck in this range here at highs. And unless we get a breakout, it's going to be very difficult to get very excited about anything, right? We have this range. We've got a little peak above, a peak below. Closes above, grind higher. Very little reason for this not to continue the grind higher. Peak below, we'd expect the 26 to get taken out. Close below, then there's no reason why we can't start to see a decent correction lower. And that's basically, we're stuck. It's a wait and see game, and you can look at you can look at pretty much all the futures contracts, and it's a very similar situation, right? Look at the NASDAQ. We're stuck looking for direction, and you can look at the RUT where we did have a little bit more action, but essentially, right, those a lot more whippy. We're still stuck fairly neutral inside these highs and these lows. So we just have to be very patient. The most interesting thing this week really has been, for a lack of the better word, the commodities just getting massacred, right? Very ugly. I mean, you can look at this DBA, you can look at this on daily, you can look at this on weekly, you can look at this on the monthly. There's very little to say apart from the fact that it's very ugly, right? So I think this is the most interesting chart out there going into this week, and based on this, the most interesting trading opportunities across the board, right? As there's no reason why this can't continue lower, but we're looking for some kind of a tradable bounce around this zone, right? Even if it's a peak below and fail to hold below, but it would be healthy to see some kind of a bounce action here, even if ultimately it's going to continue lower, right? We still think it will be healthy, and I think that's what's going to be driving the whole the most interesting trade opportunities here, right? Because if you look at gold, basically the way we'd been looking at gold was that we are essentially stuck in we're pretty much stuck in this 1350, 1300, 1200 range, right? We've been stuck in there for a long time, and basically we said we wouldn't be surprised for the market to come down and try and clip stops below this 1250, as there are a lot of weak players around there, but that ultimately, if it couldn't get any traction, we'd still expect it to try and rotate higher. So now it gets very interesting, right? Now that we've had this move all the way back down, it gets very interesting. Why? Because the longs have a chance to hold it back above the 1250, and it means that our range is still intact, right? 1350, 1300, 1250, where this is basically mid, high, and low. Now, if this week it can't catch a bounce or any move lower gets sold, then this is going to start to look extremely heavy for gold, because essentially the way we look at things, we consider that this range is going to be shifting down. So it means that the range would no longer be 1350, 1300, 1250. The new range would be 1300 highs, 1250 mid, and 1200 lows, right? So very interesting week. And this will likely drive a lot of the other things, especially, the dollar and a lot of the currency pairs. So interesting here, hold above, clearly could easily, unless we're talking about a headline, something where it really gets an aggressive move, you know, it could easily rally back to the 1280s. On a hold below, then there's very little for this until we get all the way back into the 1210s. So I think this is probably the most interesting chart out there, what you'd want to keep an eye out for, and that's likely going to drive all the currencies out there, right? For example, if we look at euro, let's get the euro. A lot of people are busy talking about, you know, euro's dead, euro's bid. We're going to continue to say the same thing we've been talking about for a long time. As long as we're stuck in here, it's much to do about nothing, and we are just waiting for either an event risk to hit the tape or for further clarity from the central banks. And if anything, this week, you know, we could get something because we do have FOMC and the ECB on deck. So, but right here, it's just holding. So as long as it doesn't break below, the closer we get to the lower end of this range, we think the asymmetric risk reward is to the upside. And as long as it doesn't break above, the closer it moves to the upside of this range, we think the asymmetric risk is to the downside. And so far, that served us quite well. So we're not really going to change that. You know, from a terms of a bigger term perspective, going back on that weekly again with that 200, this is still bid, right? So even though it's heavy, right, this is still bid. So we really need to get a close back below those 116.40s for us to get very bearish euro for a move back to 113s. But equally, we need to see a daily close above the 120 for us to get very bullish for that move back into the 126s, right? And you'll see how interesting this week is shaping up, as we said, because of that move on the on gold, you know, on a lot of the other currencies. Like look at Aussie. Aussie's particularly interesting here, right? Because similar to, again, in sympathy with the commodities, look at how heavy this is. Look at this on the weekly. Let's see if this is going to load. Let's get some of these moving averages back on here, right? Very holding very heavy. So here, unless it can regain that 77, most people are probably going to be looking at any rally as a sale for this to continue to come and take all these zones down. So I think a lot, you know, it'll be very interesting because it's you know, essentially it's very similar to gold. But watch out here if it gets manages to close on the week back above the 77, right? Be interesting one. If you look at what else is interesting, Euro JPY into these highs, we're discussing how most people will probably be looking in terms of asymmetry to try and get short into these highs, but it's just been doing nothing, right? See, you've had a lot of opportunities to try and trade this to the short side, even though it's pressing, but essentially it hasn't done much. So it's still very interesting inside this zone, right? If it breaks down hard, you know, and that would, you know, link to the market to selling off hard. There's no reason why this can't sell off very heavy. But for now, you know, it just keeps on catching bids. So it's just stuck. But remember, it's the same thing as we said on Euro USD. The market is just on these in a holding pattern, waiting for the central banks to come out and give us a little bit more clarity. And you can see that despite the very aggressive move on gold and on some of the other commodities, right? You know, Euro is just waiting, right? Euro is just waiting. What else we got? Kiwi. A lot of people asking about Kiwi. As far as we're concerned, we're still stuck here in this broader range, right? And essentially, another key week, it's the same thing, right? What are the commodities going to do? What is gold going to do? What is the dollar going to do in general? But here, if it breaks below these 68s, then, you know, very heavy. But so far, it's been putting up such a good fight. You know, you'd expect after this move down and it holding so heavy, you know, how hard can it be to take out the 68? Right? You'd almost think, you know, it's almost unheard of that all tight stops behind the 68, especially on the day close, can survive. But here the market is always telling you something, right? It's either telling you that it's just dead, right, and nobody cares. Volumes have been decent, all things being equal. So you know, we'll have to wait and see. But it's again, everything is at this key inflection point, waiting for the next catalyst. And here, clearly, this is not, if you get a day close below and it starts to move aggressively, this is not one you want to try and catch. But equally, if it starts to stabilize, there are a lot of shorts that need to cover some profits here. So it could be a quite nice little tactical trade to the upside. In terms of CAD, again, it's kind of stuck there, looking for, waiting for the next catalyst into that level. You see how we're stuck, the 200 here, and then you've got the other two moving averages still stuck inside this range, with this 128 being pivotal. Really wondering what to do, right? We've clearly had very nice trading opportunities, right, on this this aggressive move down, this reversal on the daily here right at the 50 for a move back up. But globally speaking, you know, we haven't gone anywhere. We really haven't gone anywhere. And if you look at USD JPY, a lot of funky action here. We keep on discussing about how important this 112 is, right? And move, look at that move back above 112, back above, came back into it, held pretty much to the pip, and it's trying to rotate higher. But essentially, where have we gone? Nowhere, right? I mean, again, the ranges are wide, but in the bigger scheme of things, we're still hovering here. So unless we get a day close above the 114.50s, or unless we get a day close below these 109.50s, there's still an awful lot of chop here, especially in low liquidity overnight sessions. This could easily try to continue to move higher, right? Especially if gold is puking. But, you know, you have to be cautious if you're long, getting aggressively long into these 114.50s. And if you look at Swissy, another one which has been fairly interesting here, but it's just you see it's having trouble. It's having trouble moving. So again, the question is, are these highs going to hold? You know, if these highs going to hold, don't be surprised, especially into the CB meetings, to see this trade back into the 98.50s, right? But again, we'll have to see what happens in the open also on tonight, see if anything funky happens on the Bitcoin futures. It's anybody's guess, right? But so far, everything's still in a holding pattern. And, you know, it's one of those markets that really favor, you know, if you want to be very bullish, you can find an excuse to be very bullish. If you think it's high time for corrections across the board, you can find a very eloquent explanation or thesis behind that. And most people are just going to gravitate to the news, to the research that fits their own bias, right? But essentially, bottom line, if we look at the king or the queen of where the world goes to look for liquidity, the ES, essentially, we're stuck here, right? We're stuck. Unless we get a proper break, it's just much to do about nothing. So with that, wishing everybody an awesome week. Thank you so much for the likes. Thank you so much for sharing the content. It's always good to have new people listening in on the stuff. Don't forget, if you're interested in more detail on the S&P in this range, we discussed it. It's up on the YouTube channel. And wishing everybody an awesome week. I don't know if it's, again, speaking of own biases, I don't know if it's a hope or a feeling or whatever, but I think we've got the end of the year should be fairly interesting, and we should see volatility pick up. And, you know, let's see what happens, guys. Have an awesome one. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.